It's time for Commonwealth Common Sense with Susan Stimpson and Kevin Scholla.
Hello, Susan. Welcome back.
Hey, Kevin. It's great to be here.
So President Obama, fresh off another State of the Union address, a lot of ho-hum in it for some. I mean, people predicted a lot of things he would say, and sure enough, he did. And, you know, this promise of utopia that still hasn't arrived. And I think you've noticed more about his overreach and how he's been a divider, not a uniter. And it's exactly what he did not talk about when running the first time in 2008.
It was difficult to watch on Tuesday night, and I will admit I could not watch all of it because I was very frustrated by the tone that was struck. And even though some disagreed with George Bush when he was the president, I think that he did strive to have the right tone, that he was presidential, that he understood that what he said, you know, the American people were paying attention to it. And it just struck me with President Obama, it may work for him, and they may win elections based on this divide and this conquer, but for the long-term health of our country and even for the relationships of the citizens, you know, we look to the top, and the tone is set by our leaders. And it's hard to say this, but he really just looked like a punk giving the State of the Union speech. But what concerns me even more is his blatant promise to be the kingmaker, that he is going to make up his own rules and he is going to go around Congress. And I just want to encourage the GOP to stay on message and to stay strong on this, because right now we have an opportunity of drawing a line in the sand and just say, no, Mr. President, I'm sorry, but you're not king of the United States.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of things toward the end that President Bush did that I wasn't pleased about, especially the bailouts and whatnot, but you can't question, you know, George W. Bush's love of country and, you know, the efforts he had to protect us following 9/11, and here you have a guy who's really exploiting one of our military heroes during the speech, and you said about not being able to get through it. I mean, you're not alone. I mean, and not only is it from the point of the lies or from the point of we've seen this already, it's also downright boring at times. Like, you know, people used to say, all right, State of the Union, whatever party you're in, you know, we want to hear what's going on. What are the ideas? I mean, there's just nothing happening there. Sarah Palin said, you know, she was busy getting her kids back and forth from athletic activities and whatnot, listened on the radio and looked at it on her phone. But, you know, people aren't even running to hear this anymore because you already know days before what's going to be said.
Well, and unfortunately in America we have another competing interest, and that is, you know, the electronics that we're all doing at different times. But I think it's even more important for the president to use that opportunity to encourage us and to lay out his vision for America, his or her vision for America, and where he as the leader is taking us. And I didn't hear a lot of inspiration. The only really positive thing was, you know, honoring the soldier who had, I think that was his 10th deployment. That was a very moving tribute. It would have been nice maybe if he had started with that and kind of just started out on a high positive note. So I was just disappointed, but I do want to encourage the Republican leadership to stay strong and to stay tight on this message and to push back on it, because I think it's a very dangerous precedent of what President Obama is doing.
You mentioned the punk aspect, and I have to say the smugness. I mean, it permeates through the television, and he flat out comes out in the words too. I mean, he's basically saying at some points, "Look, if Congress doesn't do it, I'll do it. I'll make it happen. I'll make a rule." I mean, what kind of leadership is this from a United States president? And what about Democrats in Congress? Aren't Democrat representatives? When will one of them stand up and say, hey, wait a minute, I'm elected by my people here in my state to represent my district, and here's the president saying, nope, whatever I feel is going to happen, doesn't matter what they think. Well, do we not need a Congress?
Well, unfortunately, the Democrats have learned that there's a formula that works, and they're using it. And they're using it nationwide. They're using it here in Virginia. They used it, this formula, the war on women, so that Terry McAuliffe is now our governor. They just did the same overreach in the Virginia Senate, where the majority is now tipping in favor of the Democrats because the lieutenant governor is a Democrat and he breaks the tie of 2020. And they just did a rule change that completely goes against the Senate rules, much like Senator Harry Reid did as the majority leader in the U.S. Senate, just undoing hundreds of years of tradition as set out by the U.S. Constitution. And I think Americans are looking around and scratching their heads, and they have no confidence in their elected leaders, and we need to encourage our elected leaders to be leaders and to uphold the Constitution.
Yeah, they're big on the rule changes, the made-up rules at the end. I always feel like, if your football team's losing at the end of the game, let's play a fifth quarter. And, that's kind of what they do. I remember back in New Jersey a few years back when Bob Torricelli had to step down in disgrace, had legal issues, and he was trailing big time against Doug Forrester for U.S. Senate. It was past the deadline to change the candidate, and somehow they got an activist judge in there. They brought Frank Lautenberg out of retirement, and he wound up winning, and Jersey was still without a Republican in the U.S. Senate since the 70s. So it's, this hocus-pocus thing. But remember, one good thing, Susan, we did learn from the President in the State of the Union, global warming is real. He told us that, and I have on good authority that he consulted before with the Tooth Fairy, Bigfoot, and his fictitious non-football playing son.
It was interesting that there wasn't a lot of depth, I do not think, in the State of the Union. He played it careful, and he played it punk, so disappointing.
Very much. Susan, thank you very much.
Thank you.